can remember that they're changing my voice. And they are basically racist whites, racist Jews, and racist LGBT. So this is part 2 of why everyone else is wrong about the end of the Old Testament and the Bible, really, because it connects to it, and why I'm right. It's also my official stance on the human race. When people get this wrong, they look so stupid. They look so dumb. They look like some kind of rapist in a church, a mosque, a synagogue. They look like some kind of an idiot who just disrespects God and their families to the extreme while pretending to be doing something. Just so stupid, so stupid. So let's first use the example, and makes a great example, especially if you're from America, of someone from a Native American tribe, right? Say they're a Cherokee, and they decide to move to Europe with their family. And 3 or 4 generations later, they say that they now identify as, say, English, because they don't like that the Cherokees have a certain order. And let's say in this scenario, the chief is actually the alpha, the greatest warrior as well of their tribe. And so they don't like that, so they're going to now identify as English. And they make up their own religion, and they lie about reality, and they code messages. Okay, who among you doesn't know that that's some bitch ass shit? Who among you doesn't know that that's some sissy punk shit? Now, part of coming to terms with who one is and living in reality and finding the purpose of life is admitting things like this. Keep in mind that every tribe on this planet, every group, they talk about their ancestors. Now, why would you act like that person, this person I made up who moves to England, okay, and now identifies as something else? Why would you make that mistake? Why would you cut your ancestors off at the moment you moved somewhere? That is stupid. Now, this might be painful. It's like the Bible and popular culture, right? The Christians supposedly went around the world and said, you're all wrong, and this is what's happened here. And they said it in America, where they aren't really mentioned in the Bible, okay? You've got to really stretch interpretation to have them be mentioned. So when you hear someone telling it in a way that's true, you should come to terms with that's what's happened, and it was a mistake to lie about these things. Now, keep in mind that some people tried to tell the truth. Some groups of people, right? Some tribes did a better job in trying to tell the truth to their people than other tribes. But for one reason or another, they left out a very critical part. That there's one human race, there's not a bunch of human races. And over time, they diverged into different groups, yes. But they still have that kind of religious commonality, that kind of universal commonality of being from Africa, where Homo sapiens cultivated. And we know that there's a bunch of racists and scientific departments. There's a long history. Look up the history of Eurocentrism in Western science. That is exactly why not to trust scientists about certain things. And the bell that rings the loudest is religion. The bell that rings the loudest is also history, where the two overlap, and how they affect dating, and how they affect arrogant people trying to seem superior to other people. Pretty straightforward. I'm sure we can all agree that this stuff is 100% accurate. Some people don't want to admit it, but they really need to admit it. I'm not trying to insult anybody. I'm not trying to diss anybody. I'm trying to make sure people understand how to interpret the Bible, which is about how to interpret the history of humanity. To separate Africa from the Bible, and I'm not talking about just Egypt, but Africa in general. I'm not talking about just Sudan, Somalia, Ethiopia, or Northeast Africa. I'm talking about Africa in general. From the Bible is a huge, huge mistake. The people who do this do not understand what they're talking about. And I'm not a racial supremacist or a continental supremacist. I am a moral supremacist. Moral order, moral supremacist. I deal in the facts. I live the facts. I live in reality, not psychology, theater arts, propaganda, ritual madness, what have you. I live reality. And so, as we look at the Royal African Falcon Martial Art Order, okay, we have to understand that the word human is not enough for more than one reason. For example, are Homo erectus human? A lot of people say no. But they are probably very similar to early Homo sapiens. We have no reason to separate them from the human story. They are part of the human story. So, the word human, quite often because of white supremacists, Jewish supremacists, and their LGBT cult supremacist allies, and a lot of LGBT might want to, contend this, but they're wrong. They know that Greece and Rome are said to civilize the world, and they're probably the most gay places on the planet at the time. Very gay, very gay. Child molestation, fanatically gay to the point where they molest children like whatever fanatic homosexuals we have these days molesting children as part of their cultural vision. Okay, so the word human is insufficient because you think of a white person. We all come from Africa and not Europe. We all look like Africans at one point and not Europeans. So to define human based on Europeans who partially went through the Ice Age and drastically changed the way they looked after God and nature created man in his image in their indigenous location. This caused a lot of racist white people to throw fits and to start revisionism, to the extreme. And then when they came in contact with the Jews, in a certain way, they decided to make the Bible from their Torah. And to this day, no one even understands very well who the early Jews are. But as far as anyone knows, they were a black sort of people who wrote themselves into the human story in a way that's unfair. But they coded the truth in their story. That was them coming to a cult agreement with whoever, because people believed even back then, even racist Jews back then, they believed that the true story of what has happened here should be told through religion, so they coded it into the story and they superimposed themselves on the heroes so they could tell their children in a way that makes them feel superior, just like we see with the history of Eurocentrism, which really, became more dramatic when Europe was clearly identified as a place with Judeo-Christian values. Judeo-Christian values. Like you have the phrase Amen Ra, where they try to put Amen before Ra. You have Jupiter Baal, where Jupiter is put before Baal in Rome. It's an amalgamation of two ideas, of two spirits, of two deities. Right? Europa is a deity, Europe. And Judaism and Jews are connected. And the God of Judaism and Jews and Judah are connected. And so it is with Jupiter and Juno and West African witchcraft, which is called Juju. Jupiter, Juno, Juju, West African witchcraft, Juju, and it connects to sexual behavior. It connects to the idea of being successful, right? Of using witchcraft to achieve a destiny or some manifest destiny. It is very sick. I don't care where it comes from. I do not approve of it. So also in Africa, you had people responding to the Royal African Falcon Martial Art Order. This is part of why there are so many tribes. There's a lot of reasons why there's many tribes. People split over different reasons. Some are religious, some have to do with land, with women, what have you. Okay. So in order to understand how we interpret the Old Testament, we have to understand what it's based on. This is a book that has lots of people who interpret it different ways. Before we even get to Christians, you get the saying 2 Jews, 3 opinions. You think those opinions are limited to secular matters? No. They also have to do with religious matters. As we've seen over the years, the Jews were some of the main people pushing atheism and Satanism and Luciferianism, which they make a distinction between. But it's all evil. We see different factions even in the Bible, the Pharisees and the Sanhedrin. We see them arguing over Scripture and how Paul and others use that to kind of find a way to survive in the book of Acts. We see that it is definitively proven that they did not agree on the Scripture. As far as we know, even in the story, they weren't aware of who actually wrote the story. It doesn't say in Genesis that Genesis was written by Moses. People assume. So they don't even know who wrote the story. For all they know, their enemies wrote the story and been laughing ever since. Nobody knows. So just like with the Ten Commandments, we see that a very significant moment occurs, and it's on a mountain, right? Nature, a mountain, right? And several mountains are very key. Mount Sinai, Mount Horeb, and Mount Zion, to name a few, are very important mountains in the Bible. So as we look at the Ten Commandments, and I brought this up in part 1, but I want you to really understand this part because people don't get it. You see that God speaks directly. He says, you know what is right and what is wrong, so don't do what's wrong. That's what the Ten Commandments is saying. It says, don't kill. I should have to elaborate anymore. In fact, should I even have to make these 10 commandments? You know already. You know for so many reasons. In Egypt, they talked about what's right and wrong. In pre-dynastic Egypt, they talked about what's right and wrong. Before ancient Sumer existed, as rather a pitiful civilization that racists put extras on, mind you, they understood right and wrong. They were making stories before the Epic of Gilgamesh. It was well understood in the area and all over the world what the difference between right and wrong is. You think people migrated all the way across the world into the Americas? A long time ago, 20,000 plus years ago, whatever it is, and they had no idea about the difference between right and wrong? There are animals that know the difference between right and wrong to a large degree. You think they were able to migrate across the world without knowing the difference between? They did. So the Ten Commandments was a message of you already know the difference between right and wrong, which includes lying about people's identity. And in the Old Testament it says, woe to you who call good evil and evil good. And that extends into the book itself. When God curses people, he confuses them. So as these people came with a book, which is Bible, and Torah, Ha-Rat. Why is it Ha-Rat scrambled? And O-T, Old Testament, right? To Ha-Rat. To rot. Why are they rotting? Because they're confused about who they are and about what the divine order is and about what to do. And as they come across it, they say stupid things like, we're not supposed to do that. Thus, we see in the New Testament, Christ chastises them in one of the most potent ways in any religious story ever, where he says that you live by mere human rules, customs, and traditions, and you're paying God lip service. Mere lip service. When God made it clear to you, take this seriously. Honor the Sabbath. Honor God. Honor the religion. Have no other gods. First, put God first. A God that is all good, all knowing, and all powerful, the one true God, to put him first. A God of justice. And we see in Psalm, which is also in the Old Testament, Psalm 50, that God is a God of justice. We see in Psalm 9 and Isaiah 9. God is known by his acts of justice. He's exalted by his acts of justice. So how did they know the 10 Commandments were from God? Because God is known and exalted by his acts of justice. In the New Testament, when they questioned Jesus, how did they know that Jesus was a good person and that they were messing up? Because he said to them, you know by their works. Because he said to them in John 10, to judge him by his deeds. If he does the work of God, then he's from God. He said, look at the deeds. Now, did he give him a long list of reasons why? Or did he say, hey, you know already. You know already. The Egyptians know already. The Canaanites, the Amorites, the Jebusites, Hittites, or whatever they're called, they know already. The Philistines know already. They already know. The Greeks know. The Romans know. They know it is stupid to play stupid about the Royal African Falcon Martial Art Order. And there it is in the story, semi-coded. They must have had a discussion amongst themselves to say, hey, if we put this here, it's going to undermine their attempts to try to make the Jews, whoever identifies as Jews at the time, seem superior. But they said, hey, this is too critical here. We have to give them that much credit, or else you're just cursing the group to the extreme. They must have came up with that or something to that effect. So there it was in Genesis, one of the most important parts in the Bible. It's like Amos 9:7, where it says Ham begot Cush, Cush begot Nimrod, Nimrod founded Babylon. And in Amos 9:7 says, are you not the same to me as the Cushites, O children of Israel, right? The story of the Jews is superimposed on the story of certain types of black people who came together in a very potent tribe, maybe two tribes back to back. You might say the Yorubas and the Igbos, where the Igbos are like the tribe of Judah. There's different ways to look at it, but it's superimposed on that idea. And everyone and their mom was betraying the Skywalker with the Sky Law core. They say Horus, the Skywalker in Egypt. Some black supremacists might say Haru, because they're closer to the truth than white supremacists. At one point I took on the name Chukwu Haru, meaning God, Skywalker, the Royal African Falcon, top martial artist, what have you. So as we look at the story and we compare the best of rabbis we've ever seen to Martin Luther King, the rabbi, falls short. And white Jews and LGBTs have spent billions of dollars changing people's looks. They spent trillions of dollars on artificial intelligence so they can rig the deck, thus testifying against their groups further, on top of the colonialism, which is more than all we need. But all we really need is martial arts, and to look at it carefully and say who was naturally, keyword naturally, shaped like what and why. Because the Lord is a warrior. Psalm 89, it says God anointed a warrior. Why did he bother to say he anointed a warrior? Why did Moses bother to say that the Lord is a warrior in his song? And Psalms is a book of songs. So he's singing praises to a warrior. And there you have Psalms of David, where God is saying that he anointed this great warrior and set him apart as his very own. So the story is about God setting apart a warrior as his very own. And we see in the history of the Middle East, people come up with all kinds of arguments. It's not far from Ethiopia, where a lot of people theorize that man started. And you see all kinds of narratives. There's Islam, there's Judaism, there's Christianity, there's various pagan cults, there's Sumer. There were Babylonian religions, cults of Nebo and Baal and Asherah and Dagon and Molech. There were various deities, and people would team up together and they would amalgamate and take on other people. And so when we look at the history of the situation, and we look at the historicity of the Torah, it is like the 10 Commandments is speaking to us, telling us, you know not to be an idolater. And you know that there's a long history of idolaters pushing people around and saying you better do it our way. You know that's a huge part of the Bible. And you know that the Old Testament ends with the Jews in captivity. Babylon's system is the world that eventually got the best of the Jews because of their rebellion, and they were taken into captivity. And then the Babylonian narrative became the main narrative. And in Rome, one of the most corrupt places in all of history, the Jews started to rise to power. 1 in 10 Roman citizens, as the story goes, were Jews, something to that effect. They merged with the Gentile. Remember, Romans aren't just one people, there are a bunch of people there. And the bell that rings the loudest may very well have been the Jews, and history shows us that it must have been the Jews. And then they insisted on a story written by them, and they insisted on the Bible, which built on a story written by them or whoever they got it from, what have you. So how does the Torah end? We first must understand what the Torah is. The Torah is Babel. The main deity of Rome was Jupiter Baal, who is Bel's counterpart. He's even called Jupiter Baal. It's one of his epitaphs. So the Bible and the Torah are both things that are controlled by Baal. When the smoke cleared, they were in captivity in a nation, Babylon, that was controlled by Baal, and they merged with the Romans and followed the cult of Jupiter, the cult of Zeus, the cult of Set. They're all similar deities. They're each other's counterparts. So how do we know how the Torah ends? We first must see through the media lies that the Bible and the Torah are. They're like an ancient newspaper written by cults to make certain people seem superior. And as the Romans took over the world, through their European proxies, as the Roman Empire didn't necessarily collapse, it morphed, it transformed, it evolved into the European powers like Spain, England, France, the Dutch, the Portuguese, what have you. And they colonized the world. Here's stories from Brazil and India and America, Canada, all over the world. They colonized with their central religion, which is Baalist religion. And the Protestants and Catholics, when they used to argue with each other, the Protestants used to tell the Catholics that they were Baalists. And the Protestants come from the Catholic tree. And so they were pretending that they magically transcended Baal, and that they were protesting, right? Protestant protesting the ways of Baal with Martin Luther and his complaints that he nailed to a church or something. Okay. That was like 500 years ago or so. And we look at the history of confessionalism. We look at the history of the evangelical movement and globalism and on and on and on. And we see that it's just evolved. Any historian that doesn't know that Christianity and Judaism and Islam are colonial religions, are religions based on falsehood and the governing class's boundaries, should immediately lose all credentials. It is one of the most obvious things in history is that these Abrahamic faiths are guided and controlled by the cult of the empire, and their books are a result of a deal with the governing class at the time. We see in Islam, we see where the people who spread it were rich merchants, and Baal is a deity of merchants. And they were clashing with the the colonists from Rome. They were clashing with Jews and Christians who had their own merchant ideas. We see in Acts, when they're clashing with the pagans there. Diana of Ephesus, what have you. And they're clashing with these people, and they're arguing over who's selling what and why, and who's seen as important and why. And as Europeans, white Jew and LGBT people with these European powers went around the world raping and killing everyone, insisting that they look up to them, something that goes on to this day, not just with MAGA, but with the left wing as well. With every political party. The politic. It's clear as day. It is a great injustice and a despicable disservice when people pretend that their churches, mosques, and synagogues are serving God and not the elite, and they're behind the scenes, their clandestine network. It is despicable. Their clandestine network is so well understood by anyone who pays attention that the Klan is even called the Klan, short for clandestine, a circle, a cabal, a group of thieves. Pretty straightforward. Pretty straightforward. In the Bible, God says to the prophets in the story that he's going to confuse people as their punishment. Yes, they were punished for not fighting to the death. Right? Isaiah 57 says the righteous are taken away to be spared from evil. A very central part. The prophet Isaiah says to the Jews, if you do the right thing, which you're supposed to do, he says, quit being a punk, quit being a liar. The righteous are taken away to be spared from evil. They martyr themselves. That God is a warrior, and a skilled warrior, the most refined warrior, which makes him a martial artist. It makes him a martial warrior, makes him a Royal African Falcon martial art warrior, because Ham begot Cush, Cush begot Nimrod, who was a mighty hunter and a mighty warrior before the Lord. And with Cain and Abel, Cain offered the mere results of agricultural sciences, where Abel offered a warrior tribute to God, a tribute of the beasts of the field from his flock, a shepherd and a warrior who strikes down the lion, who strikes down the wolf and protects his sheep, versus a mere farmer, a mere craftsman, a mere nerd. And just like to this day, nerds, the offspring of nerds with wigs and muskets, Cain proceeds, especially in his white Jew, LGBT, and crypto-Jewish form, historically crypto-LGBT as well, he proceeds to screen out the righteous. The righteous are taken away by the devil, who was a murderer from the beginning, like it says in John 8. And what did Christ tell the Jews? The Jews who dominate the churches these days with their Neo-Roman allies. as they are Neo-Greek and Neo-Romans themselves. Thus, Freemasonry is about Greco-Roman culture, first and foremost, and the evolution of it. Who translated the Bible is the Greeks. So we see that these people got together and they've screened out the righteous. And when you follow the story to modern day time, everyone who doesn't obey God through me is the child of the devil. God deals in truth and in patterns of nature. Nature would have guided them to me. Nature wouldn't have allowed so many of them to reproduce. It says in Psalms, it says, who is like God, right? Who can proclaim God's mighty acts? Who is like him? In Isaiah. In the New Testament, it says it's enough for a servant to be like his master. Like his master. Who is like him? Who's doing the same thing? Whose works are the same? And we see that they choose to reproduce in the spirit of Satanism, of ill-gotten gains. So as we follow this story to its finish, we get people in West Africa who aren't the same as North Africa or East Africa or even South Africa. As when the Romans occupied Egypt, they did not occupy Nigeria. It wasn't until like the 1400s or so that we see these Neo-Romans touch down. And they look around and they say, well, who is like them? And they make a deal with witches. They make a deal with whoever's LGBT-like or inclined to become LGBT to survive. Just like you see going on today. They make a deal with every Judas they can find, which is a key part of the Bible. Judas betraying Christ. They make a deal with every center they can find except for the most loyal in the Skywalker's culture center, not some kind of crazy cult, but martial art warrior center. And this leads us to me being born in 1981 in America. Because over time, during the Nigerian Civil War, my father comes here in the late 60s. Okay, a war which the globalists funded and backed the Muslims as they do to this day, just throwing the Christians just enough of a bone. But the Christians aren't really Christians, are they? They don't follow God and Christ. They follow the church and the Western establishment and the comprador elite and the internationalists who don't care about God at all. They don't care about their families because they follow Saturn, aka Satan, aka El. Hell and El and Bel and Spell. Rhyme and reason. And so just like in the tradition of Cronus, right? The crow's son, the black sun, the sun turning black in Revelation. They devour the life worth of their children by having the children in this world, Galatians 4, right? More are the children of Sarah with God than Hagar in the flesh. And that Jerusalem in the sky, what Jerusalem is superimposed on in the sky, is our mother, the mother of truth, the mother of virtue. These are the principles that Proverbs propounds. Proverbs says, look for wisdom, not for the flesh, for insight, for discernment, for sense, for humbling yourself before God, knowing that people persecute people who humble themselves before God, as Christ says in the New Testament, as a character in the story. He says, no servant can be greater. If they persecuted him, they'll persecute you. So to tell the truth about these things, though they elevate me over everyone else, and I'm highlighting that, it takes a certain humility because people start acting like punks. They start acting like cowards. They start acting like mockers and scoffers and devils. They start acting in a way that's childish and senseless and reckless and silly. Well, I'm manning up, my heart beating in tune with God Almighty. They start doing stupid military hazing pranks, fraternity pranks. They start threatening to rape and kill. They start using sensitization and desensitization, psychological tactics for psychological warfare because there's some kind of sissy that relies on psychological warfare instead of a man who's willing to die for God at the drop of a hat. God created that in his image, Not some psychological warfare, children of Cain kind of punk. Not some Canaanite, not a Sodomite, not a Gomorrah worm. But somebody with the heart to obey God Almighty, to obey his commands and his chain of command. Not some kind of racial supremacist sissy saying, you better not say that. Acting like Walter Peck from Ghostbusters. That is a devil, not a warrior of God. The Lord is a warrior. His order is a warrior order. Angels are warrior beings. The righteous are mighty. Proverbs 28:1, the wicked flee from the responsibility to obey God, though no one pursues, no one of worth. Just the walking dead pursues, just betas. But the righteous are as bold as a lion, and their true pride derived in serving God and not letting God down and loving God with all their heart doesn't allow them to shrink to fit. The righteous rise like the sun, and they cast out the darkness that is the essence of the cowards. They cast out the devils and the demons, Mammon and Azazel and Asmodeus and Lucifer and all the demon dogs that hid from my challenge because I am superior, because they are idolaters, because I am the top. And these are mere demon channeling rich worms and their allies, who where it matters most, write it down, where it matters most, I have stopped. Loyalty to God is written on my soul, on the tablet of my heart. They think if they can try to put words in my mouth, that they'll fool you. They think that they can convince you that some geek worm nerd is more romantic and poetic than the top martial artist ever possible. So they play stupid, silly games like YouTube and Google. They play stupid punk games like Apple. And they team up and they hack my videos and change my voice and try to make it so I resemble them. Mere worms, mere rebels, mere cowards. The punks who are outside the gates because they're not men. They practice falsehood. They're sexually immoral. They are child molesters and their allies. They are propaganda tools, fools. They're the children of corruption. The children of betraying their own family. They are the children of Saturn, of devouring their own family souls and hopes and opportunities, and trying to turn them into their hopes and opportunities into some kind of Western garbage, like some kind of decrepit witch, some kind of ratchet slut with a broom and a hat and a book of pagan spells, some kind of Crowley-looking sniveling worm. Well, I have trampled these punks. I've conquered these cowards. Horus that made them hide, Haru that defeated them, Christ, the Son of God, that trampled them. I'm talking truth. Why their words mean nothing at all. They are like an ant trying to make a noise. They're like an injured rat squealing. Why, I'm the Lion of Judah, the Son of God. So as we look at how the Old Testament ends, to not consider these things is to not know what you're talking about. You think that the story ends with a bunch of spoiled brat Jews from the Hamptons or something in Israel giggling like a fucking sissy, having stolen land unfairly, having ran psyops like a punk, instead of fighting the good fight, walking in the light? See John 3. That corrects any misconceptions you have in the Old Testament, where those who are righteous walk in the light while they hide in caves. They should have behaved. And now them and the souls of their offspring are fucking slayed. Okay, so very key in the ending is dating. Right? We see in Matthew 24, they keep giving their daughters in marriage. Who are they marrying and who aren't they marrying? And that determines what kind of people there are. Who are they marrying? Who are they having children with? How are they raised? What have you. So going back to when I was 12 years old, the last 32 years or so, 32 years, write that number down. It's very key here. In the last 32 years, I've only had 2.5 years of relationships or so. You know, relationships, dating, what have you, just 2.5 years. In a multicultural place, that's the most populated state in one of the most populated countries in the world. People from all over the world. Where quite often the people back in their home countries are more scared of the government. They're more afraid to serve God than they are here. So that means that I had 29 years searching on the internet, at school, at the malls, at the parks, at the beaches, at Westcliff. You see me trying to talk to females in some of my videos if you've been watching my videos. Spent $2,000, which is a significant amount of money for this day and age, renting cars because they sabotaged my car. Male and female alike working on this case, sabotaging me. 29 years. Excuse me, 29.5 years, 29 and a half years of the last 32 years, I have been single and miserable as the most romantic person that ever lived. As the son of 2 doctors, 1 a humanitarian and a brain surgeon. Why people have tried to catfish me. Gays and trannies have tried to go on dates with me. They've tried to flirt with me on the phone, what have you. While California betrayed me to the extreme, why the world betrayed me to the extreme, why the churches, the mosques, the synagogues had countless representatives here. You know them by their works. They raised their daughters to shun Jesus because they are the cult of the flesh. Why the hell wouldn't they see it in the most righteous person that ever lived? Because they are the blind following the blind. They are the lame following the lame. When it's time to act, it's as if they're crippled or something. They're the people who call good evil and evil good. They call holy profane and profane holy. So we see in the word seal, it's a play on words for las E. The E for effeminate, emasculate, evil, what have you. Silly, shady, fatty, skinny, sloppy. Things that occur when you don't scramble to love God with all your heart. Unless you're born crippled or something. Because the flesh isn't what matters. Are you those things in your soul? Your soul would not let you serve the devil if it was good. But it's broken, it's lame, it's blind, it's corrupt, it's callous, it's insensitive. 29 years of their Western devil philosophy that contaminated the world like it did New York, till it was called the Rotten Apple. Like it did Baltimore until it was called Murdermore. And Los Angeles until Lost Angels is associated with it. Corrupt devils with no love in their hearts. "29 years as I was by myself, betrayed, because people reproduce with the scum of this planet. It's even called planet. It's part of their plan, their schemes. Those schemers. And the schemes of folly are sin, and people detest a mocker. That's what Proverbs says. The righteous detest the dishonest, and the dishonest detest the upright, or the wicked detest the upright. Both. There's different translations. 29 years, why you sniveling worms, you wolves, you rats, you serpents, you vipers, why you children given to corruption, Jew and Gentile alike. While you sat there like Eeyore dogs, or you were assertive like angry vipers. You Freddy Krueger types, you penguins. You didn't love God, and so you gravitated to what is like you. Your marriages were despicable. Revelation and revelers. You're sissy, greedy revelers. Not a sincere peace in your soul. You're insincere. You're selfish, self-deluded, conceited. You didn't believe in God's justice. Like the prostitute in Revelation 18. You argue that you sit enthroned as queen and you won't mourn. And as your planet falls down, isn't it what you deserve? Even the homeless deserve what's happening to them. How much more do the rich deserve to cook forever? Their wickedness will testify against them. Their attempts to confuse things will testify against what they have done to the Son of God. Will testify against those inferior forms of life. As their families live in eternal disgrace. As their predecessors already cook. Did not God's justice overtake those worms? The reason why people die in the first place, you cowards. You sniveling dogs. You who bred to hug the earth like a fucking worm, like a snake. Like a snake, you stick to the earth like a slug. Scared to do what's right. Why fly high in the heavens like a falcon? Faster and master. Why you and your allies, your despicable allies, are headed for disaster. Think about it. All victories are in principle. You people are reproducing slugs who are hugging to the earth like a bitch. Hooked to a machine like a fucking coward. Whose families were far too stupid to stop having kids. Far too stupid. They're even called kids. The children of goats. And I separate the sheep from the God-forsaken goats. Key word forsaken. The word bread. A play on words for be red. The color of the devil. The color of the damn Republican Party. And I don't like any political party. Republicans are a special type of filth. Inbred trash. Klan-related garbage. Serving the con as a conservative tax collector dogs. Publicans are tax collectors. Republicans, neo-publicans, doing it again and again as some sniveling, greedy punk. Trying to pretend they're bad like an ICE agent. They call justice just ice. Who do you think you're kidding? You devils will cook, and I will personally see to it. Because when God called to you through the top martial artist, you acted like sniveling, scared little girls. Hugging the earth like a worm with glue poured on top of it. You are like dung on the ground. You're refuse because you refuse to be men. And as you are hiding from your masculinity like you're hiding from God, it is a pitiful sight to see you people get your way and to see you be complete bitches at the same time. Your way is bitch.